Hi, good evening. Welcome once again to the Gildarie Freddie Kissoon show right here on the Guyanese Critic platform. It's also coming to you live on YouTube. A few minutes late, our apologies. Freddie and Critic were fighting. Critic is in the studio trying to recover long scratches on his face. Tonight, we have with us a very important guest. But first of all, I would like to say, Freddie, I make jokes with you sometimes, but that's because I like you. I don't do that to a lot of people.
But your
However,
jokes,
I must
let me
say,
cut you
I don't know, you can't
your
cut
jokes
them.
gotta be good too.
All right, you could say that. I don't think you have an appreciation of what good jokes.
The jokes have to
He
be
doesn't socialize
Mr.
much.
Seelall,
You got to understand.
the jokes
But
have to be
I must tell you, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, that Freddie Kissoon, he went shopping and his tie is in better taste tonight. So that's good news to start with. Um, Before we start getting into the hang of things, I must tell you that in the between 2000 and about 2010, I was out of the country during the period of time for a couple of years, and a lot of stuff happened. Missing AKs, there was a lot of killings. Policemen were killed, more so than other years when you look at the numbers, and a lot of other things. We have right now in our midst somebody who would have been experienced, been investigating, and have even written about it. About 2 months back, there was a launching of a very important book. I think it's a must read for everybody, but I'm going to hand you right over right now to Freddie Kissoon, who is going to give you some details. He would have done a critique on it, a review rather, in his column in the Kaiser News. And so I'm going to say, good evening, Freddie. Good evening, the former Commissioner of Police, Seelall Persaud. Freddie, over to you.
I want to start on an oxymoronic note. Light yet serious. Gildarie, I was joking, and you have to learn to take a joke. When you brought your diary and you're writing questions to ask, I was just joking, saying, what are you writing there? That was the last program, and since then, you don't have your diary with you. No, I was just joking. Bring your diary and write your notes. I didn't know you would have taken it so seriously. Having said that, just briefly, you asked me if I'm being paid by the PPP, maybe because of the way my politics going.
Are you?
Well, I told you no, but I'm wondering if I could have your honest opinion now. I'm wearing a red tie. Would I be accused of being a PPP supporter?
Freddie, this is a good question. I wanted to address something like this.
Answer the question.
No.
so we can
I'm going
get
to
on.
answer it like this. I have my way. You can't tell me how to answer, Freddie. I'm going to answer the way that I want to answer.
Yeah.
Okay. My apologies. Freddie brings out the worst in me, ladies and gentlemen.
No, what
I
you
saw
know, I
some
could change
comments.
your tie.
I saw some comments, especially one person from, I think it was the Middle East, and that person said, "I see that your program now is pro PPP." I don't know when I get up in the morning, which side of the bed I'm going to get up from. It depends which side I went to sleep on, and we have. Anybody who sits in the chair, I could guarantee you, I can't speak on behalf of Freddie. I think he's going to speak for himself. Anybody that sits here, they're going to be asked the hard question. Are you performing? Do you believe that their finale is doing this job? Do you believe that Bar Jagdeo is running this country? We're going to ask
Yeah,
those
that'd be the
questions.
question
We're
on
going
my
to ask
tie.
Aubrey Norton whether he's doing his job. Freddie,
Will I be accused of being a PPP?
yes,
for
you
wearing my tie?
would be.
But
It
I
is a
have to-
natural.
But just hold on, speak to Mr. Seelall while I change my tie. Could you lend me a jacket, please?
Go right there.
Good evening, viewers. I want to start with a statement. This autobiography by a former commissioner of police, the contents of it, the contents of it in any country, small Barbados, small Jamaica, especially Italy, not to mention the US. When that book was published in those countries, it would have been the talk of the tongue. They would have had debates, polemics on it. What is contained in that book by the former commissioner of police is simply riveting, explosive. Do you know, since the book was launched on June this year, last month, there've been total silence. Mistress Isabella De Caries that owns Starbuck News, Dr. Alisa Trotz that Rights in the Diaspora, Red Thread, Guyana Human Rights Association, Transparency Institute, Guyana Chapter, Article 13. There has been a complete silence on the contents of this book. Well, they can stay silent if they want. Tonight, we will discuss what the man who was in charge of national security at the time of the Buxton Massacre, 2006, 2002, 2006, have to say. This book is an indictment of the then serving police commissioner, Mr. Winston Felix. Now, the book describes, and when I called Mr. Seelall about my review of the book, I said, Mr. Seelall, there are some judgments against Mr. Winston Felix. Are you uncomfortable with that in legal context? Mr. Seelall said, I will defend what I have written in my autobiography. I presume, on the basis of that statement to me, Mr. Seelall will defend what he's saying tonight. With that long Gildarie preface to my statement, I will now ask Mr. Seelall about the period of the Buxton, because when I read the book and the reaction to people about the book, they are concerned about the crime situation. It seems to my mind, from the reception I got from the book, and to be honest, my interest in the book, the second half of the book about crime and how people in high places in the state connected with the state and whose job was supposed to save this country was endangering it. Mr. Seelall, that's a long question. So over to you now.
Jose, question over to you, Mr. Seelall.
Thank you, Freddie. That crime spree lasted actually from 2002 to 2008. There were peaks and troughs during the time, meaning that there were periods of quiet and periods of massacre. And that's quite a long time. I wasn't in charge of investigations at the time. As a matter of fact, when it started, I was at the narcotics branch, heading the narcotics branch. Then I served as the officer in charge of CID in A Division. Then became crime chief in 2007. And gang was totally dismantled in 2008. So yes, a lot of things happened. The crime in Guyana, we are integrated heavily into North America and the Caribbean and Latin America. And so a lot of, when I said we, the Guyana Police Force, I always refer to the force as we. The types of violence that we get in Guyana is not exactly like what we get in the Caribbean, Latin America, and North America. Most of the crime in Latin America and the Caribbean are perpetrated because of organized crime. Guyana, it's twofold. We have a level of violence coming from organized crime, and we have a level of crime coming because of politics and ethnicity and related to those issues. We are more like, more like the type of crimes we see in Africa. In Africa, the violence is promoted by, is supported by political systems. And so they use ethnic divide to get it going, all to achieve and maintain power. And we have a lot of crimes in Guyana that are related to those issues. And if we look back at the origins of developments towards independence and post-independence Guyana, you see that it started with almost all Guyanese on board one political party in the fight for independence. Got divided because of ideology issues promoted by foreign interests. And then they use ethnicity in Guyana to promote violence. The two major parties that evolved out of that one had race-based supporters. And they use that race base or the race issue or the race card, all kinds of definition that people gives it, to divide people. And you see on all the elections, at that time was elections for the legislative and then after independence for government, from those years right on to 1992, you see a level of violence prior to the declaration of election results. So when the campaign starts, the violence starts, and when the results are declared, we get a period of calm until the next 4 years when the campaign starts again.
Mr. Seelall,
And after 1992, in 1992 and after the pattern change again, the violence started to come after the results were declared. And so my own experiences I'm talking about, as well as research that I've done and quoted all the people, all the academics who have written on it. Some of them very renowned and Guyanese as well in the book, but also foreign institutions as well as foreign academics that wrote on it. So there has always been in our contemporary history violence that are election related, promoted by the politics of the day, and they use the two major parties, that race base that they have is used to divide. You know, the recent protests we see elements of that coming out every time. They came out and they expressed themselves not only in certain types or certain ways, but against an ethnic group. No need for that. It wasn't provoked by ethnicity. The issue that they were supposed to be protesting were not provoked by ethnicity. Everybody wants professional policing, all races in Guyana. They want the services to be helpful to communities, to individuals, to protect those rights and freedoms that they have. Everyone wants that regardless of race. Why go beat up on one that is not responsible for anything that happened? They were just ordinary people going about their business.
I want, before Gildarie come in, to announce to people who are looking at this program where your book is available. Because it's not at Austin, which most Guyanese know, sell book. But there are places in Georgetown where you can get the book. Could you please tell our viewers where people can get the book?
Yes, I can. What I'm trying to do is to recover the cost of producing the book. And so I'm doing distribution myself. However, the publishing company is also doing distribution. And so in Guyana, I brought in a set of books that is available at certain stores in Guyana, like Chino Store, at at Regent and Light Street. Best Buy.
Chino Store, let's repeat that. Chino Store, Regent and Light.
Regent and Light Street. Best Buy Auto Sales at Ornock Street, Queenstown.
Best Buy is not in Peter Rose Street?
Ornock. I think
Rose.
it's Ornock.
That's near to the...
Some in Queenstown there.
Yeah, it's in Queenstown.
It's Peter Rose next
Okay.
to that security firm.
Yes,
that's Peter Rose Street.
Yes. That's there. Survival Supermarket on Sheriff Street had some. I am not sure if they're out or they still got. Still have. Imam Bacchus and Sons Supermarket in Essequibo at Affiance, and at Henrietta is also selling it.
Thank you very much,
The
sir.
distribution will continue, but in New York we have two places there: Dave's West Indian Supermarket and Rockaway Restaurant, and then in Maryland a Dave West Indian Supermarket as well. But it's available on Amazon. It's available on Barnes and Nobles, October. There's actually a website named Stepping Out of the Horde at Weebly. .com. So it has information where the publishing company made it available as recent press, but it's all. I will also put on that website places where it's available locally and overseas.
Thank you very much. So we have here Mr. Seelall Persaud, who was a former Commissioner of Police 2014 to 2018. In the closing, going on to the end of your term in office, Mr. Seelall, as Commissioner of Police, you made no bones about it because it made the news, and you did acknowledge that it made the news. You handed, well, I'm just using what the them boys said. You handed yourself some license, gun license, and according to them boys, you went from one side to the next to the other side, interviewed yourself, then grant yourself some license. You explained it in the book, Mr. Seelall. Could you explain to the people what really happened?
Yeah, yes, I did. Sometime in 2016, I applied for permission to build a shooting range to the Minister of Home Affairs, and that was granted. I did not build because I don't want to be in office and be doing business that is controlled by the police at the time. So the plan was a retirement plan. Now, people go to the licensed firearm holders has license to carry 100 rounds of ammunition and not more. Anything more is illegal. That's what the law allowed by virtue of the license. A person driving up to the highway, that's the Suzuki Linden Highway, to shoot will want to shoot more than 100 rounds. Can't leave your gun empty, which means that you'll have to shoot less unless supply is available there. So the application for a dealership is not a firearms license, it's a firearm dealership license, which allows someone legally to sell ammunition. Was applied for. It ran into crunch time. I had a lot of leave during that period, and so having gotten the license to operate the shooting range, I didn't see a problem. The law did say it's the minister that has to approve, but I didn't see a problem with it. So it's the police that issue the license, the dealership license. The police actually sells the license on behalf of GRA. So
did you seek the ministers, or did you, just for the sake?
I think it was inferred through the operation of the shooting range.
Okay.
I didn't see or foresee an objection to it.
At the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen.
And the thing is, that goes through a processing. The processing has to do with the character of the individual. So the ammunition don't get into the hands of criminals and so on. If you can't, if a commissioner of police or a retired commissioner of police is not of that character, then who is?
I think at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, in the hot seat, the former commissioner of police, I think at the end of the day, though the idea of pursuing that business, he says in the book that he has shelved it because it was not feasible. I think that was what.
Well, there were several issues that came to mind. One is that the economy dives heavily. This is a recreation issue, so people use extra money to involve in sporting activities and so on. When the economy dives, that money becomes smaller. Disposable income becomes smaller. So yes, it's a question of affordability and then what people will choose to spend on. The other thing is based on responses towards me from the government. I want to believe that because this facility is controlled by the police got some controlling authority, government has licensing conditions and so on. I believe they would have been so disruptive that it would not have been profitable for me to operate. And it's not regulated by the law, so they might have imposed all kinds of conditions. You see, when the law sets out the conditions, then it's easy, you know, this is what you have to meet. But when that becomes dependent on a person, and it's whatever comes to mind.
Freddie, I know that you want to jump right in.
We didn't show the book. We didn't show the book. But could you
Yes,
in your copy?
it is stepping out of the herd. My life in the Guyana Police Force, Seelall Persaud. But there was, when I read the book, Freddie, I took less than 2 days and all of the work that I had to read it out. And there were some riveting moments, almost like a thriller. Like, for example, when the police force was tracking Feynman and his gang, Rondell and his gang. There was some points that were made there, and it was linked back to the murder of former Agriculture Minister Satsaw. One of them was that they found on one of the gunmen, I think Mr. Willie, Uncle Willie, they called him. They found the ID card of the assassinated Minister Satsaw. The second thing is, which I found that was very interesting to me, is that the police, this thing is almost like a thriller, you got to read it. The police, while they were tracking Feynman and his gang, it went all the way till up the Berbice River. And you got to read it, how they went and they took pickup. And a businessman, he named the businessman in the book, and you should read it, Mr. Kwalanda, Mohammed Kwalanda, helped them, was foot to foot with the police, helping them, when they asked him to give his resources. But at one point in time in that book, Mr. Seelall wrote that they put a tracking device on a vehicle, that was supposed to be transporting Feynman. Mr. Persaud, could you give us some of the things that you would have recalled that took the police out of the comfort zone into an area where you had to step your game up to track down Feynman, who was a major threat?
I am not sure what is the comfort zone of a policeman. It's like
Well,
it's like a reporter. When things happen, you get in the fields, you get behind it. You guys do that too every day. So it's similar. You have to go where the issue is to deal with it. The police delivers face-to-face service, so you have to go to treat with victims, with perpetrators, with witnesses, with all these people, and you have to go where they are. And so, yes, one of the reasons that I took the operation out is that there was a pattern of police mobilizing based on intelligence. And when they show up at the scene, there's nothing there. There were politicians actually saying that there are no criminals there. The police are just targeting this community for nothing. And so I got the sense that while the police were mobilizing, information is passed on, whether from internal or external, I don't. But the movement of them away from target areas, sometimes at least, was based on information leaked to them. So I mobilized outside of the police force. That's how Mr. Kolanda, I sought his help. And I sought help from other business people, putting mud tires on the police vehicles, getting a boat, and everything else, because the road is on one side of the river, and where they were living in a camp was on the other side of the river.
Christmas Falls.
Christmas Falls.
Up the Berbice River.
Yes, about 300 miles up. So yes, we had intelligence of the vehicle that would be used to move them from somewhere in the Linden area to somewhere that they're going to hide out. We didn't know that forward location. And we did get the opportunity and put a piece of technology in that vehicle. However, we knew when the vehicle got into Linden, but lost it after then. When I say we, I mean Joint Services. And so when we had intelligence again of them at Christmas Falls, I decided to mobilize outside, take a small team, and we may be more effective. Rather than walking into information leaked and in the middle of the jungle, you're walking into an ambush.
And you were leading those teams?
I led the team out there, yeah.
There is an invisible part of the book, and I think we need to make that part visible. The overall thrust of the book is that security confrontation with criminals was compromised, and you have at least 4 incidents with the Commissioner of Police, Winston Felix. I could remember saying to you when we were discussing the launch and my review of it in the Kaiju News, are you comfortable legally with what you were saying with Mr. Felix? You said to me, that happened, I am going to stand by it. So the invisible part of the book is that given this approach to crime confrontation that was compromised, then one could understand why the thing was so internecine from 2002 to 2008, because the people that were responsible for guillotining the criminals, the crime situation, were in fact kind of encouraging them. At one time in the book you said evidence was presented to the Commissioner of Police, Mr. Winston Felix, you were stating that in the book, about important things that were going on in Buxton, and he couldn't be bothered.
I don't think you can check those pages. I think I used the word functional superior. You see, when information is sensitive about something that put you at risk, put your family at risk, and so on, the tradition, the practice is not to write, is to go one-on-one with somebody. And when you go one-on-one with somebody, you write in a book, then you can't prove that you did say that. So I use the word the term functional superior.
There were times when you named Mr. Felix.
Yeah, there were, direct. But there were other people there who are still around.
Who could be at the very right.
Yes, they're around.
I think he had
they're
some
around.
point.
But Mr.
And some of the issues were public. For example, the recorded conversation between him and someone else regarding the Agricola massacre.
What this book has done without naming Mr. Granger, if you read the book and then you familiar with what happened with you, Mr. Granger, I think you didn't, but this book paints Mr. Granger in a very, very negative light. Let me explain. Mr. Felix, the Commissioner of Police, was made a minister by Mr. Granger. Mr. Felix was on tape saying things that should have got him dismissed. Yet Mr. Granger made him a minister. And while he was a minister, Mr. Granger held a commission of inquiry which he called for your dismissal, and had a commissioner of police in his cabinet with so much evidence of wrongdoing against him. What was the problem with you and Mr. Granger?
I don't think, and I said that in the book, I don't think that I was the target of that commission of inquiry. I speculated then when I wrote before the elections. I wrote 2019 when I wasn't getting work.
The president called for your removal.
No, he called for a commission of inquiry. He commissioned an inquiry to investigate the investigation into this alleged threat to assassinate him. And so I think that I speculated that had something to do with the upcoming election. I am not saying anything further on that, because after that COI on the election, I may write another book on policing, the continuation after I retired. What happened with the police force after I retired? That machinery that was put in place for that election. There was a special machinery put in place for that election.
Are you listening to what he's saying?
Yeah, no. I can distinctly recall after the commission into some man saying you want to kill Mr. Granger. After the commission, yes. I think either the recommendation of Mr. Granger himself asked the removal of the Commissioner of Police.
I don't know that. I have never come across that. What happened after I at the time of the inquiry, I was on that accumulated annualized vacation leave. So I had a lot of leave, because a minister before, in the previous government, used to give us part of our leave entitlement, and did nothing with the other part. Just
No,
I-
call the
for many
minister's
years.
name if that is
for,
true.
For many years.
Call the
Minister
minister's name.
Rohi, Minister
Minister
Rohi.
Rohi.
It affected not only the police force, but the fire service and the prisons. And so, after my first 2 years as commissioner in 2016, as a matter of fact, I told my minister that, listen, I have all this leave accumulated. I'm not prepared to lose it. So it's either you pay me for it in lieu of the leave, payment in lieu of the leave, or I'm going on my leave. And I don't want to be on leave a year before my retirement. So I'll take it so that I can come back for my retirement functions. We look forward for that. And so he came back. He told me that it is not supported by the government, payment in lieu of leave. He told me that he would push for that, but then came back and said that it's not supported by the government because it's all, they're thinking that they will have to deal with all in the police force, fire service, and prison service. And so from 2016, I started taking 100 days and that kind of stuff for late 2016 at the time. And so I was on leave there, and when I returned, I received a letter from the minister saying that I should go, that I'm going, that he's sending me on special leave in public interest. I don't know what that means.
That's Ramjatan.
Yes, I know the public service cater for special leave. People who go in on full-time training, people who go in on overseas duties, you're not here to perform, so you get special leave to go. But I don't know about special leave.
But then they wanted you out.
Pending nothing. Well, it might indicate that, but then I receive a call to come back on in the following year. So there was a gap between when I was supposed to come back sometime mid-November. I went on special leave and then came back mid-February.
I cut you about the election thing, and the next, and you may have to write another book. Sorry about that. Continue on that. That you, based on what you know, you have to write
I'm
another
saying
book.
I'm tired with that. I tired with writing a long time, not an autobiography, but some analysis on the police force. I had always wanted that if I can't do it within while I serve, meaning authority in the police force is in one position. So if you don't reach there, you really can't exercise from a policy.
I'm not
basis.
sure I got you clear there, Mr. Persaud.
Uh-huh.
Are you saying that leading up to the elections, that you were saying to the public here today, it's probably not in the book, that there was a deliberate move to put the police force, maybe certain people in position and readiness for elections?
I speculated, I wrote that, that I speculated that the COI was for PR. And what I mean is that to let people believe that things are wrong in the force. So when you make move, nobody questions it. But was putting together a machinery, the police force is only one component of that machinery to support
No, but you know
a particular type of election.
But you know the political dimension to that statement. You are not going to say it here tonight. It's the people like us to say it. What you have just said is that I interpret it to mean that there were preparation for a certain thing. There were preparation for things to happen during the elections.
By putting
interpret
certain
that.
people in place.
I wrote in the book that
So
I
there were
speculated
intentions.
because let me tell you, if you target me to removal from office, the Constitution speaks about a particular procedure that you have to adopt. So you have to get a tribunal headed by a judge. That judge has to prove misconduct, not mistaken judgment, error in judgment, but misconduct, before they can remove you from office. That investigation, what the crime chief was working with the police legal advisor at the time, and they had a relationship where they talk every day. The file, they used to go back and forth to the investigations, the evidence collected, documentary evidence are packaged in a file. And that includes document pertaining to whatever other evidence, physical evidence exists. So somebody sees a gun, for example, the gun is not in the file, but the statement of the officer that sees the gun is in the file. That goes to the legal advisor. They talk. The legal advisor write, and that particular legal advisor, every time it write, is to do specific investigations in ordinance. When that thing went about 10 times to the legal advisor, and all that is written there is continue investigation. Well, what? By doing what? That is not stated. And so it was keeping the investigation open. The evidence, to my mind, was clear that it was a falsehood that was reported.
In the book, Mr. Seelall, and something along Freddie's question a little earlier, with a statement I think you wrote about the former president David Granger. David Granger made some statements with regards to suicide and Indian men, cane cutters, and you were not too. You didn't. Your words. When I read it, it wasn't too kind to Mr. Granger. Could you explain a little about what was that, so the people could understand coming from your mouth?
It's a statement regarding the reason for suicide, and that I believe was racist. And for it to be said in a setting, in a formal government setting at the highest level.
What did Mr. Granger say that you didn't agree with?
Well, he said that the reason that suicide rates are high in the sugar estates area is because of the chemicals that the men are using. It makes them impotent,
Yes.
and their wives are laughing at them. And so I'm looking at two gentlemen of East Indian descent who grew up in sugar estate areas where almost everybody works in the sugar estate, and they're silent on it. I could not believe. If somebody tell me that story from the outside, I would have rubbished it.
And he was serious.
But I was there, yes. The current Prime Minister was Chief of Staff. He was there in a meeting too. I consider the statement to be racist. I think I call it gross leadership misconduct or something.
No, but a statement like that should come from a medical researcher.
It should come from a research. It should come from a research.
Yeah.
Any research. Any researcher might be able to go interview families and they may tell you that.
You and
But
comfort.
I research suicide. There aren't much to go on. And I also, we used to investigate suicide superficially, just to know that the death was self-inflicted as opposed to murder or accidental or any other thing. So once we know, we find the motive for suicide, we find everything looks like that's the police. Then we just submit a file, it's concluded on that it's suicide or whatever. However, we never find as a motive wives laughing at impotent husbands.
Why? How Mr. Granger knew that? Anyway.
And that's my point. This has never been published in any research. It has never been reported. I've been covering all my years as crime chief, and now I'm commissioner of police. I spent 7 years as crime chief, and we cover suicide in the reports going for National Security Committee meetings. The crime report for that meeting is prepared by the crime chief. So I even went further and do research. When I started a suicide helpline, there was nothing else available apart from the walk-in centers at Georgetown Hospital and Borbis and so on. And they treat it as a total mental health issue, not something specific to suicide. So I had all these trauma counselors within the religious community that was working on board with us in the Cops of Faith Community Network. And I threw this thing out, hey, people who are going through depression and all the other steps before they actually commit suicide, maybe we can help them. We reach out to them, we find a way.
I'm going to test
And so I research in Guyana the same thing about causes of suicide. There weren't much done.
I am going to test your intellectual character right now at
Character?
this moment. Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm going to test your intellectual character right now at this moment by asking a question that all journalists in this situation with youth, former commissioner of police would inevitably ask. It's a banal question. Mr. Seelall, do you think your predecessor, Mr. Winston Felix, was disappointing and disappointed you as Commissioner of Police and did not perform professionally?
You know, it's difficult to compare. Here what happened. The police works in particular social, political, economic situation, and it's different from time to time. So by the time I serve as commissioner, the political dynamics may have been different from Mr. Felix's time.
But you were not gracious,
I would not
positive to him
attempt.
in the book. I mean, the book informs the entire world, not only Guyanese who reading it, that this guy was not operating professionally. I looked at 4 parts of the book in relation to Mr. Felix. I think you're treading carefully here, but your book did not. Your book was not generous to Mr. Felix. I'm putting the question another way. Based on your experience with Mr. Felix, did you think he should have become a cabinet minister?
I don't know what's the criteria for a cabinet minister, so I can't really comment on who should be and who should not be. The considerations are different from me appointing a police commander, for example. There are different considerations.
I'm going to
Totally
persist.
different.
Were you happy with him as police commissioner?
You know, we were accustomed then to command and control leadership. You don't think you do. You do what you're told to do. The parameters are you don't break law because nobody could give you an illegal instruction. You're not compelled to obey an instruction that's illegal. But outside of that, it was pretty much that.
Mr. Seelall, your book, there was 2 very important themes or topics that I thought that really interest me. One, and I think AG and Lal would have mentioned it at your book launch, and the connection between criminality and politics. That's one. And the other one in the book that you you were in some pains to really describe it, was the racism in the police force. I'm not sure. Correct me, but that
Yeah,
was
I wrote as
right.
one of the challenges of structural
You
racism.
were very specific and lots of instances, and you talked about that. I want to ask you 2 questions here. Racism when you entered in the mid 80s, and now, or let's say 2 years back in 2018 when you left. Was there much difference? Was there an improvement?
Yeah, and you see, it's multiple factors that were responsible for that. And I wrote about it. It showed that, listen, this racism starts since, or keeping the Indians out of the police force started since the British time. They had policy. The reward based on patrimony. The people who get the jobs are people who become Britishized, or if there's a word like that. You know, cultural English, British culture. And they control people through exercise of that culture. And so if you do the right thing, you get reward. But what the right thing is becoming a Christian, becoming wear suit, salute the boss, you know, and salute in wider interpretation, and that kind of thing, and the reward for that. The Indians tend to not change their culture, stick with themselves. They keep their religion, they keep the food they eat, they speak the language that they speak when they came, and so on. So they didn't want them in. It was, according to a research that I read, it was when they arrested a set of them for labor offenses, put them in the lockups, and can't get no information who mobilized the strike and that kind of stuff. So they decided that they have to employ them to get information about them. So they employ them and deploy them into their own communities to get information. And so the policies of physical stature, height and chest size and so on, the folks still got them. was to keep the Indians out. And when they find that the Indians were at that height and that chest size, they say unmarried. The only ethnic group that married at 18, the only ethnic group that married before 18 at 10 and 11 and so on, maybe even before them, were the Indians, because the parents do the thing and they stay with their parents until they're of age and then go live together. Well, they live with that one, the boy's parent for a time. That's the culture. So when they put unmarried in there, it was primarily to keep the East Indians out. And then there were several commission of inquiries I wrote about too, that I researched and quoted, that talk about the ethnic disparity and how that will impact services to communities. The story is that the police force, since the origins, protected elites by suppressing the masses. They protected planters and the crown by suppressing all the other people, the workers. And then in post-independence Guyana, the same thing happened. They protect elites by suppressing the others. And that's why all them roadblocks and cardinal swords that you're talking about still continue, because people socialize into that. That's how they know to do it. So the people, when I joined,
rather than a former commissioner of police.
when I joined the force, this was what these people were socialized into. So I write continuously that I never experienced hate in the force. It's just that you can't recommend a East Indian man because it's taboo. You can't recommend him for promotion. You got to do 5 times and join colleagues to get recognition. You got to read the whole book, man.
I think I read the whole book. Pass much, Mr. I'm getting older to go here. Pass much, Mr. But listen.
And so they didn't really hate the East Indians, but they socialized into keeping them out and to see them as people who are genetically inferior.
But sociologically, the white, the Portuguese, and the mulatto class, I don't think they hate Indians. They just assign roles for us and say, these are your roles. Keep there. And therefore, they don't see it's necessary for Indians to be in power, Indians to be in government. So that all that you're saying there is, I'm glad you're saying it as a commissioner of police so people out there could hear. But your publisher, and I think viewers would want us to get back at this book. And personally, I want to get back at the book.
Could you just repeat the book because people are asking for it?
So the book itself. The name of the book, Stepping Out of the Herd, the autobiography of the former Commissioner of Police, Seelall Persaud. This is a book you should read if you are interested of how Guyana was destroyed between 2002 and 2008. I think the publisher and our viewers want to hear more about this book, especially the man who woman can't afford to buy the book. You mentioned briefly.
You can afford to buy it?
It's not $63. Oh, come on, Mr. Seelall. Well, his autobiography is $63, man.
Well, maybe he put a lot in it. The value his work by documenting it. My number one objective was to stimulate discussion to improve policing services in the future. So I can't go expensive, but I have to recover costs too. So I have to strike that balance there. And that's why my price is.
All right. Mr. Persaud, in that book I read, you spoke about the murder of Minister Satsa. But I can't remember if you mentioned if the police ever discovered a motive. It was laid, of course, to the feet of Fine Man Rollins and his gang. But was there ever a motive? Did the police ever find out why and whether there's probably a thought force directing those people to do that?
Well, in the accounts of that crime spree, you see clearly the hand of political elements.
From the opposition at the time or the government?
Well, there were fingers pointing on both sides. So I wrote about Phantom. I wrote about Fight for Freedom or the Buxton Agricola, whatever. There are several names that gang. And there was this narrative. You're asking for motive, we're talking about evidence here.
But the motive would point probably to...
Then there was a narrative that came out that said regarding the Phantom, that the PPP government was somehow involved with Phantom. There was a commission of inquiry regarding the former minister
Gajraj.
which cleared him, of course. But the allegations were that he was with people killing out young black people. That was one of the biggest recruitment tagline. And that is one of the factors why you're saying that it's people within the police force or within government that wanted this thing to go on and acted on professionally. Maybe that's a factor. But another factor was recruits become very, very available because of that line. You're killing out young black people is joining up to resist this. To change it.
Well.
And so they always had a wave of recruits.
Well, I think
to pull
Waddell,
from, and that's why it lasted so long. Yes, Waddell was one of them with this television university on the air that made statements that would not bring about peace. On contrary, it's more
well, you know,
warlike,
in the book, in my review of your book, I took you to task. Well, I don't know. I didn't. I should use more persuasive language. I didn't.
I disagree with.
Yeah,
I got it wrong. Yeah, that was what it said in the review.
But why Waddell was killed, and you were a bit hesitant to elaborate on Oliver Hingston. From what I
Not
know,
to elaborate, but to name him.
right?
To give a name, I'm saying here in your review, you said that the former GDF officer regarding the AK-47s and the bank robbery, the GDF AK-47 and bank robbery was a certain person. I said it's an ex-soldier.
Okay, but he couldn't sue
military
you.
officer.
He's dead. But Waddell is dead now, so let's talk about Waddell. I still can't believe his common law wife, who was a former one of the leaders of the WPA, who was a close associate of Walter Rodney, could have had a common law relation with him, and when he died said he's a peaceful person, or he believed in nonviolence, one of the two things. I couldn't believe that because I think you know, and I know as somebody who investigated Boxon, I'm saying, Mr. Seelall, you know, Waddell was planning dangerous things. Waddell was planning dangerous.
Are you asking a question or are you saying that?
I am saying that.
Okay.
Waddell was planning dangerous and destructive things. And now that he is dead, you cannot be sued for libel. I'm asking you, are you aware of the violent activities he was doing in Boston?
You know, that's another thing I do. I write about that violence, allowing room for people to draw their own conclusion on several issues of governance. If a TV host is bringing a man who is wanted for a series of murders and so on, dress him in camouflage with an AK-47 looking like Bin Laden and calling him a freedom fighter, who this whole country knew, well, his name was being called as a criminal, who the police had collected evidence on for several crimes, including murder. He was in jail. I write it in the book, he was in jail. He broke out, he's one of the jailbreakers, right? One of the 5. He was in jail because of crime committed when he was in Blackie London gang. Blackie London was the man that was killed in Eccles in confrontation with Giant Services, and then the opposition draped his coffin before the square of the revolution. So what are we celebrating as a society? And you know, this thing, the same issue, the issues like those cross my mind when I look at what happened on the East Coast the other day. The people from Victoria rightfully get certain information which they don't think is right, and they protest it. You know, my thing on that, my worry on that, is that you got 150 youths sitting down in a couple of communities doing nothing.
Already available.
Readily available for somebody to pull them out. That is bad, and that is something that the government should look at and try to get. You see, when I engage communities in the social crime prevention program, I find people there hungry for leadership at that level. Central government, yes, but you're not connecting with them house to house and all over. You might go to some, but how much you go? You gotta use the people that are there. There's leadership in that community. And you gotta find the right people and you gotta shepherd these youths out of idleness into production, build skills, give them hope, you know?
There was during that 2000 crime wave, I don't know, or mid 2000. I was at Kaiser News, and I remember myself and Dale Andrews was reporting, and one of the things that we found that Dale and I broke was the youthfulness of some of the gang members. Were you shocked as a crime fighter of the youthfulness, and what was the posture of the police when they discovered that? And did you had a number as to what we were looking at? Let's say 15, 20 youths, and when we say youths, there was one as young as I think maybe 12 that really blew my mind away, Freddie.
One of the guys who got killed.
The gang members. In fact, if you go to look, I think you talk about
Not Christmas Falls, good farm.
Luzaknan. There was narratives that were being told that some of the guys were being given AK for the first time. And
I wrote about
right.
that,
I think
because,
in that
yeah.
given AK as young as maybe 12, 13, I think Mr. Seelall, and that confirmed what we were reporting on, heading into people's home and killing, and that was what the gang members were made up. And it's such similar to here you have 150 persons sitting in communities. Big issue because I was looking at the East Coast issue with the Cove and John, where it started from, and you would not believe how quickly this crowd built up. Where were these ladies coming? Ladies, children, boys on bikes. You would not believe how many bikes were on the scene, riding up and down, one way up and down the road. So my question to you, Mr. Persaud, were you worried when you saw the age of a lot of the gang members?
You see what I did when I became commissioner? 2 weeks after I was appointed commissioner, I launched the Albystone project. We see that the problem is you can't police a community by being outside of the community. That you're going to suppression. And the police has practiced that throughout its history. Prevention is different thing. Prevention means you start before it happens, you engage before it happens to prevent it from happening. And therefore, we gotta go very early into the communities. We gotta take the whole communities because everything that happens in that community impact them. Socialization, some studies are saying, start from conception. You got a window between conception and 11 to engage them with this nature nurture thing. So nurturing starts since then. Nature is genes and everything else that's in there. The criminology theories are telling you that listen, their explanation, and I did explain some of that in those theories when I made the recommendation. That listen, some criminals are rational thinkers, but that's not a whole lot of them. A lot of them are from, that's the classical school they talk about. Then the positive school is these strains that they have. And those learning that take place early, those nurturing, you can nurture out of something or you can nurture into something.
I don't
That's
want you.
learning.
I don't want you to call names because obviously we're dealing with libel here.
You're right. You're fighting
know-
this libel thing.
yeah, of course you have
It's
to.
real, it's real.
Ramjatan opened his mouth and said
$7 million.
Chawandas Persaud took bribe to vote with no confidence and got $7 million. The thing about libel is that you say anything harmless, you say anything that you have proof of, people sue. Do you know Wickford Burke, who gets on social media and say the most violent things, the most ugly things, sue Mr. Bawajagdo for 600 million? This is a man who called for people to push PPP leaders off the road. So you got to be careful with libel. Mr. Seelall, I know there were politicians from the opposition and one from the AFC that were involved with Buxton. I'm asking you, you aware of that too?
I'm aware of politicians from the then opposition, spectrum of opposition, political parties involved, yes.
That's
And I wrote about it. I had contact right up to the top echelon of the PNC. And so he provided a lot of valuable information that allowed us to dismantle. And then we flipped. There were two youths from that gang that gave evidence in the for the state in the Luzignan massacre, the Bartica massacre, and several other murders during that period too. They're still giving evidence. I saw one matter was there.
Yes, he got convicted, yeah.
Yeah, so those two guys gave evidence. They spent a number of years with us. As a matter of fact, one of them, while he was in protective custody, I put him through all these ARA courses, the computer courses.
A youth.
And then, when I became commissioner, he had done all the courses there, and I put him to work with the police to repair computers.
And
Well, he's now out of protective custody. I had.
But his life is not in danger.
No, not because of that. If there's anything that happened, it's because of something that happened now.
But I thought you take those people out of the country.
Anyway, you have to have resources to do those things. It don't happen easy. Which country you want to? You don't know any? If you go to Jamaica and when you give them one, they got 101% by you.
Do we have any system like that here, though? Have you ever done it?
It's difficult to work.
Have you ever done it?
requires protective custody.
No, like sending people out here just to get them out of Guyana.
No, not to my knowledge. But it's not easy. You gotta get bilaterals for that. So there's a political agreement, and then you gotta work out systems to facilitate that. You take a man out of Guyana and carry you anywhere in the Caribbean, people gonna know you. They're gonna know you're Guyanese, and they're gonna find out who he is if you want. These societies are small, very small. People know people. And so in a very populated country, that's easier.
Mr. Seelall.
Same thing with undercover policing and so on. You get a man posing as somebody else. We got to take somebody else and give them that role. We can't take a policeman and put him in that role. From the time you finish the police college, everybody know he police. So you get a Freddie Kissoon and you say, hey, you're a reporter, you're blah, 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 do that. But keep an eye for these things and pass it to us, and you get another revenue stream.
How many Indians you facilitated into the police force? Given your knowledge that they didn't want Indians in, did you have an active mental project?
No,
that
I didn't target, but let me tell you what happened. After we started our social crime prevention program, the years before then, since I joined the force, it was always short of staff. The problem was they go all over the place, they're not getting recruits. When we started our social crime prevention program, 6 months after, we had 1,200 on the waiting list. I reduced the 6 months residential course of recruits, bring it to four months. We compact the training. When I left, it was still about that type of place. People go and do other jobs. 6 months after you call them, listen, we got space in the college now, we can take you in the school. They left the work and come. And so I didn't target by ethnicity, but we're open to everybody. So we start select from those lists, those who would have had some work experience, who are academically qualified and so on. And they get some priority. So it's not necessarily a force come force. So because the recruitment standard for education is some primary education. I don't know what I mean.
Some primary.
In your book...
that's a policy, that's a written policy that hasn't changed all the years. It was there like that. So we start taking people with CXCs. There's actually one, he's now an assistant superintendent, but he joined with a 4th degree in forensic science. And did 4 months, then it was
and he's now
in
just
the college.
an assistant inspector?
Assistant superintendent, yeah. He's pretty young.
With a 1st degree? A university 1st degree?
Yeah, there was a policy that if you have a 1st degree, you get an assistant superintendent or on probation. But there's only so much space for that, so maybe you could get a cadet as well. And They move up. You remember, we work with establishment, or the police force work with the establishment. You can only have so much officers at this rank, not more. And it is the service commission that promotes from inspectors up. So what we do with somebody in the fourth degree, as we did in this case with this guy, when he finished the training college, put him at the lab to work, and we promote him to a sergeant. That's what the commissioner can promote. Can't promote higher than that. And we recommend to the service commission that we appoint him assistant superintendent on probation. So he got that, and then I think the last promotion he got assistant superintendent or somewhere around there.
Mr. Persaud, in your book, Fine Man, we come back to that 2000 crime wave because I want to ask the other question. A big part of the book also would have spoken about the police force. They made some recommendations. How could we move it to the next level with international, what most modern countries are doing? But the reason for the Lusignan massacre, I think there was a suggestion in your book which pointed to the fact that Mr. Rollins, which is Feynman, the gang leader, Rondell Rollins, his girlfriend, pregnant girlfriend, disappeared, and he believed it had to do something to do with the authorities. What did the police find that caused or would have seen what we term the massacre of 11 persons in Lusignan?
We don't have a motive, meaning that we didn't get through some witness. Why is it that Feynman decided to go? What we know through people who give evidence in the matter is that Feynman ordered the guns to be handed out and for them to follow them and shoot these people. Prior to that, however, these things happened. That's what I'm saying in the book, that there was a complaint that the government abducted his girlfriend and took her somewhere. I got another story from this contact that was I spoke about, connected politically, and I had information from several other sources. By then, we developed a whole lot of sources all over the place and at different levels of CID. And so they were coming up with the same story. The story was that the girl was actually pregnant for someone other than Rollins. The family believed that if he find out, all of them will die because they live in Buxton. He actually sleeps at the house sometimes. And the only opportunity to move her out of Buxton that he would be comfortable with is go to the hospital to deliver. So they faked the delivery need, got her out of Buxton, and wherever they took her, we never made contact. We checked Suriname because at one time, we had a very good working relationship with Suriname police officers. And so at one time we had information that she was there. No, we never...
You could not have been mentally at ease. No human can be that. You were commissioner of police working with the government and have people in the hierarchy of that government that you knew as a top senior police officer was involved in one of the worst period, even in colonial times. If you minus the Wismar massacre, the 60s, Buxton stands out as one of the lowest inglorious violent period in Guyanese history. And there you are, commissioner of police, and some of the people involved in that thing at the political level are your political bosses. You could not have been mentally comfortable.
You see, another major feature of this book is self-development. I write it in because I had to write on my experiences to explain some of the policing concepts I write about. And I decided that, listen, youth reading, if they read about my own development, they might find some motivation for their development. And so one of the things I strive to develop is something I call emotional competence. And so I learned...
I like how you emotional competence.
Yeah, I don't worry about things that I can't control. The things that I have control over, I'll spend all my time worrying and fixing and planning and preparing and doing things there. I can't control who's going to be the next minister of whoever, so I am not worried about that. I know how to protect me from doing things that are illegal. So if you instruct me to do anything that is illegal, I won't do it. You have to dismiss me. And then to do that, you got to go through a public process. Something headed a tribunal headed by a judge. That's what the Constitution
We-
says.
A major
gotta
part
go.
of your book, going on to the end, was recommendations for the police force, and I think Attorney General Anna Nanlal says that the government would be looking at it. For the sake of the viewers, the listeners, and the others who may not have had any interactions with the book, could you tell us about the list of the top 5 things that needs to be done very quickly to the police force so we could get it to where we want it?
Well, I spoke about the leadership structure. That command and control leadership that go for years. I mean, what we need now, in my time, I discourage command and control. I even discourage supportive leadership to an extent, and I try to encourage instead participatory leadership. So you got to go down with the guys and into the communities with the people who you're working with, and you know that approach I think works. But when you go down, not tell, but come and show type of leadership. I talk about the structure, the hierarchical structure. The commander at the top, he got a deputy commander and a third in charge, and the deputy and the third in charge got the same functions as the commander. I try to encourage a functional approach, like a business model. So you have administration, operations, personnel, monitoring, evaluation, or inspections, whatever you want to call. You know, all these different functions. Under operations, you could split what the general duties, uniform people do, what traffic do, what CID do, where you got one person. Because operations, the crime chief has a role and all those kind of things. But that kind of a structure where nobody is doing the same thing that somebody else doing at the same level. In fact, what has happened is what the commander allowed the deputy to do is only that he is doing.
Okay, time has caught up with us. You want to wrap up, Mr. Seelall?
Yeah, I want
Got
to
about
encourage.
5 minutes more. Well, before you do that, just one thing, 5 minutes more, Mr. Seelall. You wrote in your book about the role of the, how you say it, the drug trade, or rather the drug personnel, suspected drug leaders and so on, drug trade leaders. And one of them did offer to help with the police during the crime wave, to assist the police in maybe finding out who are the people and take them down. I'm using my words here. Could you tell us a little about that? Because at one point in time in the book, you wrote that the then Commissioner of Police, I think Felix, would not have been very happy. In fact, you were extremely amazed or surprised by his tone and the way he treated you with regards to the offers that were made.
Well, the guy was pretty, maybe he still is pretty unpopular. Unpopular. And so, yes, but what I write about the issues, my first contact with him, because I wrote about that organization they call the Phantom, right? That's what you're talking about?
The Phantom and the others, right?
Yeah, so I think he was situated there. His role in that, not his role, but the Phantom's role in the crime spree, and the commissioner's relationship to him at one period of time and another period of time. So these things are happening, and there are guys on the crime front that are major players, and their personal relationships going on, very unprofessional personal relationships. So in one case, he had wanted to take what this guy was saying to him and determine whether or not officers did what this man said that they do without any investigation, without listening to them. You don't want even to listen to me.
You made that quite clear in the book.
Yeah, and then on another stage, he and his deputies at war over the guy because of same thing. He get information that the deputy made some concessions to the guy, and the two of them at war. Then I nearly get sandwiched between.
We got to.
And in your closing statements,
Yeah.
Mr.
Yeah,
Persaud,
as I indicated before,
no,
man.
but in your closing statements, could you? I need to ask you this: were your hands as a police commissioner and in the force, were your hands clean?
Were my hands clean?
Yes, sir.
I work with communities and community leaders all over this country. I don't know what you mean by hands dirty and hands clean, but I work inclusive with the force. I integrate the force into the community. I chair steering communities, rallies, religious leaders, and community leaders, business leaders all over.
Okay. On that
Freddie
note,
got very quiet there.
no. On that, we just signal the time has come.
Yes.
Mr. Seelall, it was a pleasure having you here. I don't know why I keep calling you Mr. Seelall. It should be either Seelall or Mr. Persaud. And Gildarie is calling you Mr. Seelall too. So we'll take out the Seelall and say Seelall, the Mr. and say Seelall. I think this book should be bought. I hope we're able to do something tonight to have generate people interest in it, because it has now formed part of Guyanese history. And anyone who's concerned about the country not having a crime spree like what we witnessed from 2000 to 2010, they need to read your book. It was a pleasure talking to you, and sometime when you write the next book about the election conspiracy,
I don't know I will.
we have to have you here. Thanks for having us.
But I'm eagerly looking forward for the evidence coming out at that COI.
Okay.
I want to understand what kind of police force operated then. That's
Interesting. And what Mr. Persaud, I got to get it right because somebody said I should not be calling Rollins, Mr. Rollins, or Mr. Feynman. I've been brought up in a respectful way. I have to be respectful to my elders, including Freddie. But what Mr. Persaud is referring to is that very shortly there's going to be a COI, international COI, into the 2020 elections, and we're eagerly looking forward to it. Guyana wants closure in that and answers, maybe recommendations, not to have a repeat on that. We are going to come back to you on Monday evening, 8:30. I've been told by Freddie we have a confirmation that maybe the president is going to be with us, His Excellency.
No, he had. That was before he left to go to the U.S. So I think when he comes back in the U.S., he may need to appraise a lot of people about what happened in the U.S. So we'll give him next week and the other week.
Oh.
So it won't be next week.
This program is open to any and all. We've extended invitation to the opposition and all and sundry, because we want to make sure that this program here, it's a hot seat. We're going to ask you the questions. That's why I asked Mrs. Persaud if his hands are clean. Nobody's going to get away from it. And I'm going to ask Freddie next week to whether his hands are clean, because that's what we do here. He could ask me.
Somebody should ask you if your hands are clean.
Well, you could
Anyway.
ask me, and I'm going to say yes. So, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. There's so much more to this book, Stepping Out of the Herd, Mr. Seelall Persaud, former Commissioner of Police. Interesting book, riveting, a must read. Have a pleasant rest of the evening. Long weekend. It's going to be on Monday. It's going to be August Monday. And you know what that is? Emancipation Day, is that it?
Yeah.
Very important day. And if you're in your colors, everybody celebrates it. It's like the Indian Arrival Day. Have a pleasant rest of the night and enjoy your weekend. Stay safe on the roadways.